because usually the person who puts in the most money has the most control because they're also going to take on the most risk. Okay, with the bank's going to say, okay, who's funding this and how? If you're not bringing any money to the table, you're not funding it. You're not going to be the guarantor on the debt. The person who's funding it is. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. I'm your host, Kenny Bedwell, and we're going to be talking about how to leverage other people's money to grow your own portfolio. All right. Now, leveraging other people's money is what we're going to refer to as OPM, other people's money. This isn't necessarily taking people's money. This is, investing with other people. You could argue that using the bank's money is OPM. We're not going to talk about that because that's kind of silly. Like, it's traditional financing. Yes, you're using other people's money. We got it. Cool. But let's talk about partnering with people, because this comes up a lot. If you're hungry to scale your portfolio faster and to really grow in real estate, the first thing you got to realize is that, and you'll hear this from every mildly successful to successful, highly successful real estate investor, someone who has a lot of experience essentially, is you have to learn to partner, okay? Because your capital and the things that you can do are limited for the most part. Most of you listening to this have limited capital, all right? So the amount of deals that you can do is limited by how much capital you actually have. Now, the problem is some of you are like, well, I don't have a lot of time either. So in terms of you growing, that might also be a limit too. So that's where a different type of partnership could come in that allows you to either have more time or the other person's making up that time while you're providing the capital. So we really have two types of commodities, as I'm mentioning, capital and time. And so for most people, though, capital is the biggest constraint. They have all the time in the world, or they can spend a lot more time on things than they really think they can, but they don't have, their capital is very limited. And so that's the scenario we're going to focus on today. Obviously, if you're got capital, but you don't have time, that's a different type of scenario and a different type of partnership that we can maybe get in another episode. But I feel like most people listening to this are more interested in the idea of, I have time, but I have limited capital. What do I do? How do I scale? How do I grow faster? Okay. Rather than just the regular beat of save up, buy a property, launch, go. Next year, save up, buy a property, launch, go. How do we expedite that process? Let's dive into it. So there's a couple things to keep in mind when using other people's money. Number one, it's okay to be afraid. All right. I'll start with that. It is a big responsibility to ask someone for money and to use it, because what if it fails? Like, no one wants a deal to fall through. And most of us are pretty adamant about, we want it to be a win-win situation for everyone. We don't want a situation where we're just trying to take someone's money and then walk away. And if it didn't work out, we're unscathed and, good to go in life. We've made some money, but that person's lost everything. That's just a really bad look and can tarnish a reputation. So it is frankly scary taking other people's money. However, I feel like using and leveraging other people's money to get over that fear comes through experience. It's doing something that you've done before because you know how to do it. Okay. So, and that's where the confidence comes in. And that's also going to help you when you're essentially pitching an investor about how to, how they should invest in your project, and more importantly, invest in you, because that's the reality of it. They're investing in you. They're not just investing into your project. So the mindset becomes really important to begin with. Now, when it comes to other people's money, you really have to think of it in a different types of ways, like business wise. There's literally partnering with people. So I go out and I partner with someone who has a lot of money, and I have the knowledge and the time, and I'm going to figure out the deal. They're going to give me the money, and we're going to figure out some sort of negotiables in between of, do I get equity? Do I get a percentage? Who takes on the risk? Who does all these things in that partnership? And we'll break all that stuff down in a second. And it might be a world where there are several investors involved. Okay. And when we say several in the terms of legal sense, up to 4. okay, in a normal partnership. That's what you can do before you have to go to the next tier, which is the syndication, okay? There's two types of syndications. There's 506Bs and 506Cs. Maybe we do, I'm thinking about time here, maybe we do a whole nother podcast on syndications if you'd like, but essentially the syndications are where you can actually bring in other investors. The difference between this 506B and the 506C is the type of investors and how you're marketing and all these other little things that are very minor. We're not going to get into that today. We're going to keep it high level. But a syndication, what I want you to remember for right now is a syndication is a group of investors. It doesn't necessarily have to be 4 or more, but typically that's when you would do, if you have more than 4 investors, that's where you have to do a syndication. Okay? At least what I've been informed on. So those are the two types of like partnerships and ways that you can, use other people's money from a business standpoint. All right. Now there is, once again, other people's money can be sorts of financing, right? You could argue creative financing is leveraging other people's money. And that is true. So there's a lot of different ways to kind of skin the cat, but I do want to focus on the partnership side. Okay. So let's talk about that because that one is more relevant, especially for people who already have property. The number one thing that I tell a lot of people who already have property is I say, look, you've taken the first initiative that most people are afraid to do. Most people want to own a short-term rental. Most people want to have experience. Most people want to cash flow on their properties. But the reality is that they just don't ever take action. And we know that fortune favors those who take action, right? Who take the risk on it, actually pull the trigger and actually make moves. There are so many people who have wanted to take action and they never did. And so all of those people are on the sidelines. All of those people are interested and they know what the benefits are. They see the benefits, but they might make excuses like, I don't have time, or I just, I don't have enough money, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I just, I don't know how to calculate anything or whatever. Analysis paralysis is another common one too. I'm afraid of making a mistake. But then they see you, and maybe you only own one property. And you're like, well, I only own one property. I'm no one special. But you are, because you took action. That actually makes you incredibly special. And like, I don't know what the number is. I'd love to know the number one day in my life. And I don't know how this would ever be calculated, but I guarantee you, those who actually buy property are in a small minority of the people, especially investment properties, that actually ended up doing it. All right. Maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20%. But if you think about that, let's say 20%. You're in the 20% that actually bought a property because you were like, I think I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it. And all the other people that said, I'm thinking I'm going to do this, they didn't actually do it. That's the other 80%. So if you're in the 20%, that means there's a level of specialty to that, right? Top 20%. Okay. Even though you just bought one property. Now imagine you have 2, 3, or 4, like, wow, you're probably in the top 5% of your peers who were interested in buying short-term rentals. Okay. So there is something special about just even owning one property. And a lot of people undermine that risk that they took, that leap of faith that they took. And you can't do that if you're ready to scale and you're ready to grow. So once you understand this whole mindset concept of like, you have done something that other people aren't willing to do, and a majority of people aren't willing to do, and you have some experience, like in terms of knowing how to set up Airbnb listings and stuff, like you should know how to do that if you're self-operating. You have enough to go to some investors, friends or family, at least to start out with, to see if someone wants to partner, someone with capital wants to invest into this. All right. Because you have experience, what can do well and what can't do well because you have experience. That doesn't necessarily mean you're great at finding deals, or you're great at designing, or you're great at photos, or you're great at that's why there's all these specialties in these services. That's not the point. Remember, the investors are investing in you. They're not investing in the actual overall project. Sure, they are, but like they care more about you and what you're bringing to the table and your confidence. So if you know how to find the right people to help you achieve what you're looking for, boom, there you go. It's about the team, right? Okay, so let's talk about partnerships for a second. So in a partnership, this is pretty common. This is actually really, really common that I typically see. So in a partnership, we're going to use the scenario here that there's one money partner and then there's you who's the execution partner, okay? So a partnership needs to be broken down into 3 categories. Number 1, control. who controls the asset? Meaning, if you want to sell the property, if you want to refinance the property or essentially exit the property, who makes the final decision on that? Who makes any final decision about anything major with the property? Okay. Number two, execution. Who is going to own the execution of the property, meaning the property management and the setup and the even managing construction and the designer and dealing with all these things? Okay. That's number two, and that's very important. Number three, this was the most understated one, risk. Who is taking risk if the property doesn't make money? The property fails or it doesn't cash flow. Who is essentially fitting the bill? Who is going to guarantee the debt on the mortgage? Okay. So all three of those things have to be determined before you get into a partnership with someone. Okay. So let's break them down individually. If I am coming in with a money partner, 100% money partner, and I'm bringing $0 to the table, okay, I am probably bringing experience, but more importantly, they're probably going to rely on me for what? The second category, which is execution. Meaning I'm probably going to manage the property, or I'm going to find someone to manage it for me, or I'm going to deal with the renovations, or I'm managing all the day-to-day operations and the execution of getting the property up and going and cash flowing. That is my responsibility. Because it is my responsibility, I should be compensated accordingly. Okay. Now, there's two ways to think about it. Number one, if you are only paid for execution, which essentially is just property management, it would be a fee, right? So the executor should get a fee for day-to-day operations, ongoing day-to-day operations, not based on simply cash flow, but based on gross revenue. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change these things up or do it based on cash flow or this or that, but I'm telling you, if you're in the day-to-day operations, you should be compensated for that. All right. Usually a property management fee, or it can be discounted. It's up to you. This is where you can get creative, but execution should be awarded for day-to-day operations. But here's the problem is if you only award the executor for day-to-day operations, if the person with control and the person who's taking on all the risk, essentially the money partner, if they're responsible for all the control, that means they could sell the property at any point in time. And maybe there was a big renovation and that property appreciated significantly. And the partner in control is like, I would rather take the appreciation and walk away. So if the executor doesn't have any equity in the property, they could set it up, do all the work, get everything ready to go, make it essentially turnkey, and then it could be completely sold from out under them without them having a say, and they get nothing in return. So in your situation, you always want to be, if you're the executor, you always want to have some sort of minority equity or minority control of the property. Okay. And that's where control is the equity, who has what equity. So now that doesn't mean you can make decisions and you can decide yes or no on selling or not selling, because usually the person who puts in the most money has the most control because they're also going to take on the most risk. Okay. With the bank's going to say, okay, who's funding this and how? If you're not bringing any money to the table, you're not funding it. You're not going to be the guarantor on the debt. The person who's funding it is. So they should have the most control, but you should still be given something. So a typical partnership where there's a money partner and a partner who's bringing the execution and the experience and the knowledge looks like usually 80-20. Now this isn't, so I want to caveat this. This isn't you have to do it this way. Okay. This is a common way I see it, but you need to think about each one of these categories and who's going to own what and how each party is going to be compensated. Okay. Because I've seen so many partnerships not figure things out. They split things 50-50 and it becomes a massive mess that they have to solve later. So with control, usually in equity and all that, I usually see the money partner gives the other person who didn't contribute any capital at all 20% of the equity. All right. That allows them to remain off of the debt, but they also get benefit if the person decides to sell for whatever reasons. And to be frank, if someone decides to sell for whatever reason in year one, maybe they had a family emergency or something going on, a major life event is probably a better way to put it, they should have the right to do so. It's their property. They're guaranteeing the debt. However, to protect the executor, you need to create a way where you have some sort of equity in the deal. And it can also be tranched out, meaning like given it periods of time in the future that you hit certain milestones or just over time in general. So after a year, you have 10%. After 2 years, you get 20%. You can slice and dice it however you want, but typically this typical structure I see is 80% equity to the capital partner, 20% equity to the person who's doing the execution, and then they get a property management fee on top of that as well. That is pre-negotiated as part of the deal. Now, the next part of this is where it gets tricky, and this is the payouts. Okay. With a partner, one partner, especially a money partner and executioner partner, I recommend that the partners are paid, the cash flow is divvied based on the equity amount, so 80-20 split, and it's paid at the same time. So whatever cash flow there is, let's say there's $100,000 of cash flow, so the capital partner would get 80,000, the other partner would get 20,000. Okay. And the other partner got 20,000 cash flow, plus they got the property management fee, and then they also have 20% equity. All right. They have $0 in the deal. It's just time. They traded time for dollars, but because that experience is valuable, that's why they're able to do that. And that makes sense actually for a lot of people. Okay. Now, the person who's, executing all this, the person, like if you're considering it yourself, you're investing all this time, you obviously have to tell the investor, hey, look, this is what I think we're going to do. Here are the numbers. Here's what I can do and my experience. You're pitching them on all this and you're breaking it down for them. But that's a pretty common partnership structure that I've been seeing in the STR space that works pretty well. And it allows the capital partner to remain passive and receive mailbox money. Okay. You can also, something important too, especially in our space, because we get a lot of tax savings, you can also divvy up the tax savings accordingly. Maybe today you don't need the tax savings from this deal, but the capital partner does. You can allocate 100% of the tax savings to the capital partner, even though you have 20% equity. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So you can structure the deal pretty much however you want with your partner to maximize what they want and also yourself. And so when you're sitting down with someone and having a conversation, a lot of the times when I'm with an investor, I'm like, well, what do you want? I want a good return. Okay, cool. But like, do you want to be a part of the deal? No, I don't. I just want to fund money. Okay, so that tells me they don't want to deal with execution. Okay, so I'm going to have to deal with execution. All right. So why else are you investing in short-term rentals? Well, I really wanted some tax savings. So they're going to place being passive and tax savings as higher priorities than other things that they might want in the deal, and like equity. All right. Because they're thinking about this for, I want some gain and I also want taxes, but I don't want to have to deal with anything here. Okay. So this is going to be a holdout. They're going to have it for, 5 years, at least 5 to 7 years before they exit. And they'll still walk away with a decent chunk of equity, and you will as well. And you'll build your portfolio quicker than you would if you're just trying to save. So partnerships are an incredible tool that you can leverage, and you can obviously throw in, there could be multiple people. I've seen partnerships with 3 people or even 4 people, and the different roles they play based on those categories. Okay. And they might call them different categories or whatever, but the reality is those are the 3 things: control, execution, and risk. Who is taking on each of those? And people should be rewarded accordingly to which categories they're owning and taking over. In my opinion, there's not one category that trumps any. I mean, you could argue control, right? Who controls the property and the asset? But without execution, the property doesn't cash flow; it just sits. Without risk, you're not getting a loan. So, like, or unless you're paying cash. But then the standpoint is, what happens? Well, who's going to take ownership of the property if it's not cash flowing? All of these things have to be determined before you get into the deal. The partnerships that go array are the ones that never determined this beforehand, didn't have clear expectations and clear governance, which is communication. Okay. I am speaking from experience on this one. So be clear, be extremely clear, document out, explain these things with each other and get on the same page, because honestly, that's how you're going to execute cleanly. Because if you know what your role is, you know what you should be doing, and the other person will know what they should be doing too. And there's really no excuse if, something's going wrong. Whose fault is it? Well, let's go back to our, chart of ownership or responsibilities, is how you want to see it, to see what's going on. But partnerships are a powerful way to leverage OPM and to get to a better place faster with your portfolio. Okay. Syndications, it's a lot more complicated, but it's in the same vein in a sense where you are now bringing in more people to help you fund a deal. And I do think this is a whole nother podcast to talk about syndications, but using OPM to get to the next level with your portfolio is all about having confidence in yourself, understanding the partnership structure. If you can explain it as clearly as I did to somebody, guess what? They're going to feel like you know what you're doing. That's exactly like, that's what you want. You want them to be like, man, They know what they want. They've got this clearly set out to where it's a win-win. This isn't I'm trying to take advantage of somebody else. That's really important. I want to make that clear as well. Partnerships aren't to take advantage of someone. It's to bring two people together who are bringing who want maybe two different things, two different benefits of the same deal, but they're willing to sacrifice one or the other in exchange for what the other person is offering. So a lot of people who have money don't have time. People who have time don't have money. Like so you need to, if you have time, then you need to find someone who has money because they don't have time. And if you don't have time, then you need to find somebody who has the time, and because you probably have the money, right? And if you don't have time or you don't have money, then there something's not right there, and there's some sort of something going on that you need to figure out and reprioritize in your life, or there might be some other thing that we don't know about. And that's a whole nother discussion. But my point being is that most people fall into one of these two categories, and you have to find the opposite person because they're looking to either save on time or make more money. And overall, like, they might want it to be passive, or this other person might want to be building their portfolio. And depending on where you're at, that's how you can leverage that. And if you're in the opposite side, so I want to address this real quick. There are people listening to this who have zero time, but they make a lot of money, and they need help finding deals, or they need someone to partner with. Okay. There's a lot of people out there like that. It's crazy to me, the amount of people who have money who don't know what to do with it. Okay. But if you don't start marketing yourself, you don't start sharing, you don't start talking to people in your circles, you'll never find them, but they're there, and you probably know a good chunk of them. And so you have to start networking. You have to start talking to people, sharing what you do on social media. If you're looking for those people who are willing to give their capital for a passive mailbox money check from a short-term rental, then there are plenty out there. You just got to start looking, and you got to start telling people what you do, and they will reach out to you. I find it time and time again. So understand the time and the money components, where you fall, what would be beneficial for you, what would be beneficial for the other person. Can you create a win-win, and learn how to structure it? Come in with confidence, lay it all out in front of somebody. And I'm telling you right now, that's how you win over investors, and that's how you use OPM to get to the next level. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It was kind of intense. I feel like it was a lot of information. There's so much more to talk about on it too. I held back. At first I was going to be like, oh, we'll talk about all it. And that's like, no, it's not going to happen. So whatever, we'll build off it in other episodes and future episodes, but I hope you found this valuable. And guys, it would mean the world to me if you could leave me a review. We're almost at 75 reviews on iTunes, I think. And I don't know what we got on Spotify, but if you could help me, let's hit 75 5-star reviews. Would absolutely love it. I appreciate every single one of you listening. And if you ever need anything from me at all, any help with anything, any questions about partnerships, feel free to reach out to me. I have plenty of experience with it and can definitely give you some tips and tricks of the trade. Thanks everybody for listening. I'll see you in the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.